This episode of Casual Friday is brought to you by Carbonite.
I mean, I once took a picture of a crab.
Yeah.
In Australia because I was so excited they had this crab.
So earlier this year, a game almost won a Grammy. Do you guys remember that? Journey was nominated for a Grammy, and it lost to Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. That was crazy. That was the first video game soundtrack that was nominated for a Grammy.
God, that was such a
It
good
really lost
soundtrack.
like Trent Reznor's like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo song.
Yeah. Well, it was a soundtrack.
Well, no, it was
Yeah. It was a good soundtrack.
It was good. It was good.
I haven't seen the movie, but
Journey
I'm going to
wasn't-
assume that that's unfair.
Sure.
Journey was so good.
That's
All,
fair, yeah.
all things that slight Journey are unfair.
Right.
I think that's an official rule.
But yeah, that was an incredible soundtrack, and that was, I don't know, do you think that that's kind of a symbol of mainstream media recognizing that, like, hey, there are incredible composers that are working mostly in video games?
I think someone probably paid off, but
Well, it's the Grammys, right?
But the thing is about Journey, and I think what really made that music resonate with so many people, and this is true of a lot of smaller games. You know, it was such a quiet game, and its story didn't tell you how to feel, and so they had to kind of get to the music to kind of thrust you along.
There's no dialogue.
And like, there was stuff that I think pulled that off this year.
Rain was like that. There was no dialogue. It was just sort of music, and they had the Claire de Lune theme, which is so beautiful.
Yeah.
That had some of the best game music this year, I thought.
I really.
But like, it wasn't. It was some original compositions, but like the theme song was, you know, Claire de Lune. So I'm trying to think of games with like original. Oh, Amnesia: Machine for Pigs had a fantastic soundtrack. Probably my favorite of this year.
Was it creepy?
It was creepy in the more like ambient parts, but then there were the parts where you sort of stumble upon something really massive, and like it would be like heavily orchestrated, and it was just like very powerful music.
Do you know, was it the same composer as the original Amnesia?
It was a different composer. It was the composer for Dear Esther.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Make the rounds.
She specializes in like creepy music or something. That's like her thing.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the ones that stood out to me was Brothers. It just matched it. It was like, oh yeah. With that music, I kind of know what kind of a world this is supposed to be.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, it's kind of pastoral with a little bit of menace.
Yeah.
Right.
Getting a lot more menacing. Okay, really menacing. But then it really played up the idea that there was something kind of there was that sense of child wonder, which kind of is how the game starts out. But then you get the interesting maturation of the older brother as he starts to see the girl. And, oh God, that game was so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, the music was, and once again, it was pantomime. And so you really had that music kind of, it's kind of like Peter and the Wolf. It's telling so much of that story through the sounds.
Yeah, I looking back on this year, Gone Home for me just stands out as such an amazing soundtrack. Both the soundtrack and the score. Obviously, the soundtrack was this kind of of the time, early mid-90s grunge and punk.
Yeah, not into that.
That had a little bit of nostalgia for me, a little bit, but
Yeah, I wasn't
Your
into
angry
it, but-
girl rock of the 90s.
Yeah,
But the thing was,
exactly.
I wasn't that into that music either, but it was just this absolutely perfect, like, just blast of nostalgia.
Yeah.
Because while I never had to listen to that music. Because I just had to go anywhere and I got to listen to that music, whether I liked it or not.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Right. Well, and that's all optional. Like, you can play through that game without listening to any of that music. But the score itself is it's this amazing kind of ambient, very sparse kind of guitar and piano, a little bit of synth, and that to me was one of the most beautiful scores of the year. It plays a little bit as you're exploring the house, but each journal that you listen to has kind of a brief kind of theme attached with it. And it kind of is married with the voiceover so brilliantly that even now, like going back and listening to that soundtrack, or that score. It's so evocative of the emotions I felt as I was playing that game.
Yeah.
If you had asked me to recall the score to Gone Home, I would have assumed that the entire game was silent, apart from like the tapes that you find and stuff. I do not remember music. I remember wandering through a house silently.
See, but sometimes that's the sign of a good score.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's so, and you know, in you describing it, what I realized is, obviously, I was just hair standing on end for so much of that game. The music did not play up that feeling. I mean, once again, I think it speaks to how effective that game was, that it didn't need to get redundant with the music, be like, ooh, spooky moment, and just did something that was actually just kind of, just there.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
But other music that jumped out to me, The Last of Us score by Gustavo, I'm not going to try to pronounce his last name, was fantastic. And then BioShock Infinite. I think some of my most favorite musical moments of this year happened in that game.
God, well, yeah, I mean, my entire review started with just that weird moment, unfortunate son.
Right, and I mean, looking, obviously it's December, so we're spending a lot of time looking back on 2013, but I can think of few gaming moments more incredible than the opening of that game as the kind of the airship comes up and they're playing God Only Knows.
God only knows what I'd be without you.
I mean, God, that was incredible, and all of the anachronistic songs, as you know, you talked about in your review.
But the one that still gets me is Girls Just Want to Have Fun.
Yes,
because it's not in your face. It's just kind of. I was like, I think the first one was at the preview event. I'm like, man, that sure said no. And it's just okay, it does
because they stripped out the lyrics, right? And
yeah.
So it's God, so good.
Rayman Legends was also good. The music levels and stuff.
Rayman music has always been good, but in that one, it's just got that.
Because they focus.
It's like that jazzy, funky kind of. Yeah, it fits the game perfectly.
Yeah.
I don't know how better to describe that.
And then of course GTA 5, which
yeah.
I probably spent 90% of that game listening to the Flylow radio station.
Cheers.
It's awesome.
Because that lineup, I was just like, I could hear any one of those songs, like for like the 10th, 11th time.
So
I'm
good.
Like, oh,
that and Radio Mirror Park are the best.
Yeah.
Really? You listen to the Flylow station when you play GTA?
Yeah.
Hey, Adam has gone to a rap concert with me before.
Tara.
What?
Yeah.
I didn't know about this.
I grew up in Richmond, California. Actually, my chosen love of music is the hip hop, and I like the political stuff.
Oh, you learn something new every day.
Yeah.
We went and saw Killer Joe together.
No, Killer Mike.
Killer Mike, sorry. You're right.
All the killers, you know, it's there's Mike and Joe and Tom.
Yes.
It's part of a whole gang.
Yeah. That game also had an incredible musical moment. The drug scene when you're falling from the sky. I forget the name of that song. I've listened to it so many times since.
Now, was that original for the?
No. So that was a remix of or I think it was a remix of a song that had been released a few years ago.
It's like two different people.
The way that they kind of layered over, dialogue from his wife and his kid and everything, just fantastic.
It is interesting how Rockstar, because of Red Dead Redemption, they're like, we better break down in the middle for another, musical interlude. It's becoming this expected thing from them.
Well, and it works great when it works. Red Dead was one of the first games.
The problem with the Max Payne sequence is that I died so goddamn many times in that sequence. I got sick of the song.
Right. But even the original score in GTA was fantastic as well.
Yeah.
I mean, just so evocative of those moments in Heat that were my favorite. Just the building.
So 80s.
The first heist is just that tinking on the piano.
Yes.
Because you're like,
so
okay, it's going to go down.
Yeah.
And for a company that has not really didn't have soundtracks. It was just the radio. Yeah. I now it's kind of unfortunate because I think it really. It wasn't the only aspect, but it helped show they got that game to be more about kind of making that moment kind of fun, cinematic, and exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it contributed to the narrative strength of that game over some of the other ones. Also, Papers, Please, I thought had just perfect music, especially that opening title screen when the logo is coming down in lockstep with the music.
Yeah.
God, that's perfect.
That's also, it's that music that I remember from movies that involved Russians that kind of said, after Star Wars was like, we must announce the bad guys with a very particular type of music. Then it was like, we must announce the Russians with something that sounds like it's from the land without fun.
Right, right. Like whether or not that actually sounded like Russian music of the time is completely irrelevant. It sounds like what you imagine that music sounded like.
Hey, if you like Casual Friday and you want to support the show, then why not check out Carbonite? Carbonite protects your data from a crash, fire, theft, or accidental deletion by automatically and continually backing up your files securely off-site. Whether you need it to support 1 or 2 home computers or all the computers at your small business, Carbonite is the better backup plan. Plans start at just $59 a year, but you can get a free trial by going to carbonite.com and entering the offer code CASUAL. You'll get 2 bonus months if you decide to buy. Remember, that is carbonite.com, and the offer code for 2 bonus months is CASUAL. Because there should be nothing casual about backing up your data.